I'm Kamali, taking you through some of the things people are talking about and some of the stuff they're sharing around the world on Newsfeed today. Self-obsessed internet influencers having to find other things to boast about online as the pandemic keeps them in their homes. How the lonely can feel better while in isolation, we hear from a psychologist. These photographs have won a major international prize. And the story of the dog and the weatherman to stop you thinking about COVID-19 for just a few seconds. Well, at the top of our newsfeed, influencers. They've been making money by selling lifestyles and products to people on social media. Now, with everyone on lockdown, they're finding their self-centered activities curtailed. What a shame. Here's Yash.
Expensive bags, swanky events, designer clothes. This is how some Instagram influencers get followers. Going to the places everyone wants to go, wearing the clothes they wish they could wear, living the lives others only dream of. But that's not so easy during a global health crisis. Influencers are under lockdown just like everyone else. And it's hard to showcase your enviable existence when you're stuck in your lounge. All they can do is share how they make coffee at home, their skincare routines, and what pajamas or sweatpants they're wearing. It was once also a lucrative business. Last year, the influencer market was worth up to $8 billion. While some analysts expect it to continue growing, it's not clear what effect the pandemic will have on the sector. So what can influencers actually influence these days? Some are just demonstrating how to be bored at home. Others have traveled to their summer homes and been judged for it. One influencer decided to live in an RV during the pandemic, and she copped it for constantly traveling and encouraging others to do the same. And some are just doing whatever it takes to maintain the spotlight. One even licked a public toilet seat because, well, I guess we're talking about it, aren't we? The pandemic has seen many reconnecting with what's most important in life. It's a tough pill to swallow for influencers who deal mostly in what's least important.
Here are some other COVID-19 related stories that you may have missed today. Well, Apple and Google are jointly working on an app to allow governments to trace if a person has been in contact with someone who has COVID-19. The tech companies now say they will not include location tracking data based on the Global Positioning Satellites system in their software. This is an effort to make people concerned their privacy is being compromised feel better about the technology. Now, tracing apps have been used effectively in South Korea, but the possibility that they allow governments to monitor citizens even more than they already do has led to some resistance to their adoption in countries like France and the United States. Environmentalists are expressing concern that the increased use of plastic by many people as a result of measures needed to combat the pandemic will further exacerbate dangerous levels of plastic pollution. The oceans are already damaged by the amount of plastics in them, and this is set to worsen during the COVID-19 outbreak as people are less focused on reducing waste. Well, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro is running a grand and dangerous experiment by refusing to listen to doctors and scientists and encouraging his citizens to carry on as if there is not a global health emergency. We spoke to two experts in Brazilian politics to try and understand why he's behaving in this way and see if it will have any effect on his supporters, apart from being damaging to their health, of course.
First of all, Bolsonaro is quite fan of Donald Trump, and whatever happened in US, he tends to replicate in Brazil. So that beginning of the crisis, when Donald Trump started to really disconsider what was going on in US and the crisis, Bolsonaro started to repeat the same situation.
Is to deny science, is to question facts, it's to question the role of experts, right? So in the case of Brazil specifically, his argument is that it's almost a fatalistic argument, saying yes, this is a virus, it can kill, but in the end also the economy is important, and we need to look into that.
what we have here is a confrontation of narratives and the confrontation of medias of diffuse these narratives also. In one side, we have the traditional press doing a fantastic job, and really in the last days during the COVID, the people accessing the traditional medias, newspapers and TV broadcasts increase a lot because they really they are more trustful in this sense. And we have the social medias. That's the area or the environment that Bolsonaro and the followers, they tend to dominate and to use more.
One of the things that these groups are doing quite well is making use of social media in a way that perhaps more sectors from the center or from the center left or other social movements are doing less so. But that doesn't mean that they are not engaging as well. Traditional media in Brazil is actually in a very complex situation because this is a media that in the last years has been very much going against any form of investment in public services. So the traditional media are seen as having facilitated the rise of the far right. But now what is happening is that they're kind of realizing the extent to which now they're being subject to, very similarly to what happened in the US with Trump.
The removal of the judge Sergio Moro was a shock for him, and for sure most of those followers of Bolsonaro that were there supporting because of Moro and this anti-corruption movement will quit the support to Bolsonaro now. That's a fact. And we are seeing since the beginning of the COVID crisis some polls that are showing that he's losing a lot of support, public support. That's also justify this very aggressive approach, calling people to protest in the streets, to coming to Brazil in front of the presidential palace to give support to him, in the need for really trying to call that, well, I still have the popular support.
Now, billions of people on lockdown has increased the feeling of loneliness for those who live alone. We spoke with a psychologist to try and get some tips on how those feeling isolated socially and emotionally can get by when they're forced into isolation physically.
I think that actually there are two epidemics going on right now. There's the biological epidemic and the psychological epidemic. People are very isolated. Anxiety and depression are increasing dramatically. We're probably getting 3 times as many calls as we typically get. So it's a real problem. People crave human contact and they're not getting it. Some people are lucky to be home with their families. That presents other kind of problems. But for people living alone, it's a real problem. And I think that the emphasis now is really on somehow decreasing the misery and realigning people's expectations. Nobody is expecting realistically to be feeling good right now. It's a matter of minimizing negative feeling. For most people who are not clinically depressed, but certainly sad, demoralized, and lonely, I would say not only reaching out to people, but people are forming book clubs and cooking clubs and figuring out all sorts of ways to increase their contact with other humans. Anything you can think of, and you've got to be creative here, is an asset. It's very important to fight against the tendency to isolate yourself. Even if you don't feel like doing it, you need to ignore that feeling and push yourself. The 3 things that are the most important I want to stress, and we use that acronym 20 beads, is for 20 minutes each day, you need to make sure that you pick up the phone and speak to somebody. And 20 minutes is a minimum. For 20 minutes a day, you need to engage in aerobic exercise. And for 20 minutes a day, some type of relaxation training. The best one I could think of is slow abdominal breathing. People who do it for 7 to 10 days will almost always start to feel more relaxed. It's imperative that people do this on a daily basis.
All right, we'll keep spinning around the world now for some other stories you need to know this Tuesday. Felix Kjellberg has signed a deal with YouTube to live stream him doing the things he does, like playing video games and being offensive, you know, internet stuff. He's signed exclusively with YouTube. The 30-year-old, who goes by the name PewDiePie, is the most popular YouTuber on the platform. He left the YouTube for another live streaming site last year in a move most observers now see as a calculated way of making him more valuable to YouTube. This is an Asian giant hornet, scary looking, isn't it? And it's now in the United States. The insects kill as many as 50 people a year. In Japan, it's the first time they've been spotted in America. They are suspected of crossing the Pacific by stowing away in shipping containers. Crafty things. They destroy honey bee hives and take the bees' bodies to feed their young. No wonder the internet is calling them murder hornets. Ecologists are warning that as many as 3.5 billion people will be living in what they describe as unlivable heat by the year 2070. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences say a third of the world's people will live in extremely hot parts of the globe by 2070. They predict the average temperatures in those areas of more than 30 degrees Celsius will be too much if people don't have air conditioning. The cost to the planet of creating energy to fuel all that aircon will result in more fossil fuel being burnt, increasing the carbon in the atmosphere, making the planet even warmer, etc., etc. And the author Stephanie Meyer says she will write some new books in the Twilight series, but with Edward Cullen as the protagonist as opposed to Bella Swan. The new book is out on August the 4th. The work of 3 Kashmiri photojournalists has been recognized by the Pulitzer Board. Here's a look at some of the pictures they were judged to have taken that were prizeworthy. And last up, a growing number of news and weather presenters are working from home, and that's leading to moments like this.
Next time, buddy, we're going to eat after this. So that's the forecast. I will be back at 4:45 with, oh boy. Oh boy. You know, she's jumping up looking for Craig outside the window.
Well, a dog getting in the way of the camera as a weatherman called Paul Fox tried to do his bulletin from home. Something to smile about, I guess. The dog is called Brody. And that's all from the newsfeed team. Reach out to me with your questions, comments, complaints and suggestions. You'll find me at Kamali Melbourne. You'll find us 24/7 on YouTube. Subscribe to that channel. Stay at home. See you tomorrow.